How can robotics be leveraged to revolutionize data collection and analysis in the AEC industry? And as somebody that's practicing, right, like neither of those things, robotics or data analytics, are really, I would say, mainstream to this point.
Technology is constantly evolving. It's only a matter of time. But there has to be a really good solution, right? It can't just assume that it's going to be a cookie cutter solution for you all. Robotics are awesome for a multitude of reasons, but they're tools, right? They're tools. They're just tools that are designed to collect high-fidelity data, robust data sets in a short amount of time, removing subjectivity and really getting to...
Welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find technology that fits their needs. Did you know that the AEC industry generates more than 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every single day? From design models to inspection reports, this massive data stream holds incredible potential, but only if we can make use of it. In today's episode, I'll be talking with Michael Paul Jenkins, director at Gecko Robotics. It's about how robotics is transforming the way we collect and analyze data in the AEC industry. We'll be exploring how scaling data, reducing subjectivity, and leveraging advanced technology are paving the way for more efficient infrastructure solutions and setting the next generation of engineers up for success. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Michael Paul Jenkins, affectionately known as MPJ. And MPJ, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
It's an honor. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Absolutely. And this is gonna be a really good episode because what you guys do is a little bit outside of the scope of our usual guests. So I'm excited to dive right into it. So MPJ, Can you start telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do on a daily basis at Gecko Robotics?
Yeah. So I'm one of the salespeople over here at Gecko. I've been with Gecko for over 6 years now. It's hard to think about that. But when I first joined the company, it was relatively small. So I started actually in operations department for two main reasons. There's a great hands-on training approach, but also they needed help at the field because we were so dang busy. Throughout my time here in those 6 years, I started in power generation, worked with power plants throughout the West and Midwest, transitioned to pulp and paper, fell in love with the steel industry, and now my current focus is on the oil and gas industry, utilizing our robots and transforming the way they handle maintenance, reliability, and capital. So I'm constantly on LinkedIn or on the phone, emails, what I affectionately call is champion hunting. What I mean by that are people who are not necessarily content with the way things have always been done in the past. People who love what they do, who they work with, where they work. These could be business unit leaders, engineers, innovation groups, technology, et cetera. But I try to find, honestly, someone like myself who's out of the box thinker, but maybe a little less scatterbrained, and who have budgets, of course, that can actually buy our services. But at the very least, campaigning to understand their needs and create solutions based off those needs. So a lot of times it's asset-heavy, capital-intensive industries. And like I said earlier, right now, focus on oil and gas, whether that be upstream, midstream, or downstream.
So you guys are kind of AEC adjacent, right? A lot of what you work on we could draw parallels to the architecture, engineering, and construction businesses, but what you guys do today, at least, is not directly working on AEC, right?
Yeah, not directly today. However, I can say confidently, again, being here for 6 years, 3 of those industries I mentioned earlier, we didn't work in, for the first couple of years I was here. We're focusing on these big industries because they're critical to manufacturing, energy. Department of Defense is another industry that we work in. Critical to get right today, right? However, as we start to solve their problems or work against those problems, then we can really start to have downstream industries that we can help out on. And so I see a huge opportunity utilizing data-driven approach, drones, as well as the AEC industry. But you got to start with the big boys first sometimes because you need revenue to get through the door. And so diving into a new industry, kind of not knowing too much about it, is risky, obviously. So that's why you and I have connected in the past and understanding that process more and how we can, again, incorporate new technologies or incorporate robotics to technologies that are already established to help inform decision-making. It's the same process, really, It's just the market cap and understanding those needs. And when, a refinery or a power plant or aging infrastructure in the commercial setting it makes the news. And unfortunately, we want to prevent those stories from happening. We really want to drive value there. But hopefully with this conversation, we can learn more, get more interest. And again, we are constantly growing and evolving. So it's only a matter of time, Nick.
Absolutely, MPJ. And to the audience, this is really good because Gecko is coming from tangential industries that can teach us a lot because they're let's say not bound by maybe the way we do things, and bringing that fresh perspective I think is really important. Understanding there's nuance just like all the other verticals that they work in. But MPJ, my next question that involves how can robotics be leveraged to revolutionize data collection and analysis in the AEC industry? And as somebody that's practicing, like neither of those things, robotics or data analytics, are really, I would say, mainstream to this point.
Yeah, to this point, but it's coming, right? It's growing so quickly and technology is constantly evolving. It's only a matter of time, but there has to be a really good solution, right? It can't just assume that it's going to be a cookie cutter solution for you all. So I can't speak too specific to the AEC industry, but I can generally speak. Robotics are awesome for a multitude of reasons. One, it got me to apply 6.5 years ago, but they're tools, right? They're tools. They're tools that are designed to collect high fidelity data, robust data sets in a short amount of time, removing subjectivity and really getting a full understanding of the asset's integrity, right? So if we're talking about just, again, above ground storage tank, failures happen where inspections don't. And it's been perceived that, assets fail kind of over time, call it 30 years. But if you can understand how the asset's performing and do these periodic health checks, you can really start to optimize that asset better. And I know that's a little bit of a buzzword, but when you have data, it's this arbitrator of subjectivity. And, because robots can work for a long period of time, continuously in some cases, and ingesting stable and clean data, right? There's constant feedback loops on that quality of data constantly. So you're seeing it's clean and that's scalable data. And so if you can create data sets as you're losing, this engineering workforce that have been doing it without this type of technology for so long, you can't replace that generation. And you have a younger generation that's coming in. So how do we maximize the core group that we have today and set up that next generation for success? One of the most famous quotes I've ever heard from a customer that I will never forget is the work that you all are doing and that we're doing together. It's about the butcher, the barber, and the baker. A little bit of alliteration for us here, but what it spoke to me was, this is how we keep this facility around. This is how we attract young engineers, because we're implementing technology that is fun to work with, that's cool, that you want to be a part of, but we're also doing the traditional blocking and tackling that we need to get done. We're just doing it in a different way. Because we have less resources, or, it's a more globalized economy. So we're constantly, trying to keep up with the Joneses. So it's a really foundational layer of success that can grow with this organization and as well as tangential organizations, like I said, that I work in. So, and it's not just Gecko, it's a bunch of companies. I come across new ones every day. There was just 2 I found out about yesterday when I was in Texas that, I'm sending to our chief commercial officer this morning and say, yo, check this out. This is something that could really be of value, and figuring out how we can integrate with them and again, really create these data sets that help us make decisions in a short amount of time.
MPJ, can you give an example to the audience? So we talked about storage tanks, right? So it sounds like you're going out there, the robots are crawling these things and they're doing something, right? But what at a high level, what exactly are they doing?
Yeah, I would say the main robotic applications that we use ultrasonics. So ultrasonic thickness, being able to tell the thickness of the asset and be able to determine, hey, when is the minimum thickness based off of, these parameters, whether it's the product inside or storage capacity, things like this. That's kind of a scalable technique that's agnostic of industry, that's utilized in all those industries that I mentioned earlier. But there's also the visual component of that as well. So the cameras, as I'm sure you're very aware of, are so intense that you can really start to create, these photogrammetry models that you can measure in, and you can see how they changed over time. other technologies that we've been able to incorporate, and I know you saw this when you came to visiting Gecko, are those traditional inspection techniques like, pulsed echo or phased array or EMAT. These are kind of like Lego pieces that go on the robot, and to be able to generate these mass amounts of data sets. And you can utilize these on, again, above ground storage tanks, nuclear missile silos, aircraft carriers, bridges, you name it. If there's a need and a desire to collect a lot of data and not put people in harm's way, there's probably a technology that can just go on one of these robots or drones that can give you exactly what you need. So it's an agnostic approach, again, but we're focusing on the areas of, that are high risk of failure. So again, that's why the refineries and the Department of Defense and things like this.
And it sounds like the technology is pretty adaptable, right? So the robot's just a means to an end. You slap a sensor on, you collect data, and then you're interpreting that data in whatever ways of value to your customers. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. I mean, when I started, it was definitely a robotics company. Again, was the buzzword to get me to apply. I would say Gecko's turning into a data company, though.
Mm-hmm.
A company that is set up for this AI generation because a robot doesn't, for a lack of a better term, pencil whip or doesn't get dust in its eye. And again, we're talking about ultrasonics in a lot of cases, but a tool that is utilizing industry standards to create best-in-class outcomes. And then this software that is so important these days, being able to take those massive data sets and put them in a format that is easy extractable, that's able to call upon, that provide insights. So it's amazing to be a part of this company again, when it was one office of 70 people to, I think we have like 6 offices now in 2 different continents, and seeing again how this can grow into a transformational company. Like I'm truly blessed to work here and be a part of it. There's no way they'd hire me now, but I'm glad I got in when I did.
MPJ, so like we've talked about this new approach to essentially what are traditional industries. So what are the challenges you guys see in scaling and transforming this data that you're collecting from the robots into like insights your customers can work with, right? Because whether it's pulp and paper, oil and gas, AEC, you're working with traditional industries that haven't done it this way before. And I got to imagine there's going to be some resistance to change.
Oh, yeah. Change management is obviously a struggle, whether you're selling internally or externally. Not my quote, but something I've been saying quite a bit is no one likes change except for a wet baby. And as a father of 2 with another one on the way, right, I know what change is like, especially with those diapers at 3:00 in the morning. But right, the culture is a big part of that. And I think that term gets thrown around in bad terms sometimes. And I don't mean it that way. It's like, hey, we have a culture of doing things a certain way. But again, going back to what I said earlier, the culture that's established, they're exiting the workforce. And there's this new culture coming in. So there's friction, and pressure, but that creates diamonds, right? As a salesperson would say. So you got to focus on that. And again, this is why I'm hunting for champions, people like yourself that, you have a job already, but you see the value in this podcast for multiple reasons, and it's driving change. It just doesn't happen overnight. The same way with eating right? Trust me, I know, you got to stick with it. And so I think it's also creating a roadmap, right? Or this is why we establish partnerships, is because it takes 3 to 5 years to really set up a program, and it takes only 1 year to pull it down. And so you have to have multiple value categories for the organization or for your department, but for what we're doing, again, it's the organization. So the culture is a big part of that, as well as the legacy systems. When I say data, right, it means different things to different people. You have to have systems that can incorporate this data. So it's a lot of volume, and you have to be able to manage it. It can be overwhelming at first as well, because you're so used to seeing data in a certain format, right? Like certain industry standards. And all of a sudden these nerds from Pittsburgh come into you and give you this huge map that I have a huge problem, right? But you don't have a huge problem. You have multiple options based off of this data set. So you have to be able to educate and be able to interpret that data set. But it's also worthless if it doesn't inform, right? Data. it can, again, what we're seeing with these AI models now is that if the data that it's interpreting is not great, it's going to give you terrible answers, like Excel 101, garbage in, garbage out. And so when you're trying to change these organizations, right, it's about challenging the people that you're working with, pushing them, but also meeting them in certain areas and agreeing about value. One of my first customers in this kind of motion, it was definitely a culture change for them. But the leader of that organization was passionate about keeping that place around. And so we indexed on that. So important, right? That was the big picture, the big idea. And we had constant, call it assessments along the way. So I think when you're looking at an organization, it's, all right, where do we want to be in 3 years, 5 years? And how do we get there? And get multiple people's opinions on it. And then find partners that can help you get there. But remember, it's a partnership. These partnerships are a lot different than, strategies in the past. You have to grow together. And if you find the right one, it can drive a lot of change and add a lot of value to your engineers, your team members, your community. Again, it's just about, finding that champion, driving change, and adapting to that culture. Because again, what you and I deal with today, right? It's going to be a different problem 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But how do we, again, look at the past and make sure that we can adapt and be flexible as change comes down the pike?
And speaking of change, MPJ, one thing that when I visited you guys that I was really impressed with is this removal of subjectivity, because part of your value proposition is the bottom line, right? It's we can say, I know that something needs to be replaced, or I know that something can be deferred in lieu of, let's say, a shutdown of an important piece of equipment. And, bringing that back to the AEC industry, it could be a bridge, it could be a building, any piece of critical infrastructure, right? So, but how do the robots and the data reduce subjectivity in infrastructure inspections, and why is that so critical?
Yeah, I mean, we are creatures of our past, right? I'll give you an example. You're in engineering. You could have 5 engineers from 5 good schools look at the same data set, and you're going to have potentially 5 different next steps. And we do that based off of our interactions in the past. What's nice about big data and the data that's a company like Gecko provides is there's no more ambiguity, right? Failures happen where inspections do not. And so by evaluating an asset, again, whether it's a bridge or above ground storage tank or an aircraft carrier, if you got one of those, it's understanding not only how the asset is performing, but being able to take that data and understand how it performed in the past, because now you have a lot of data historians as well. And so you can start to play these scenarios to see why it happened a certain way. There was a customer that we work with in the mining industry, where we did a proof of value with them, and they saw this asset, and there was 12 guys in the room, and they all got really worried and concerned. There was a bunch of reds where they would hope they would be greens. I think we might have told this story when you were here. But there was a guy that was raising his hand in the back and said, "Don't worry about it. This is a problem from 25 years ago." And he was explaining why, and it's good to see this. But if that gentleman was not in the room, they would have immediately jumped at it and fixed that problem without knowing why or how it got into that state. And so by having these data sets, again, it's able to kind of be the bridge, if you will, of the old generation to the new generation, to be able to inform what's going on, and then, again, provide options. So you have this data set, and then you can apply industry standards to it and make those systems talk to provide these options. And sometimes you have options that you didn't even know about because you didn't have the data to be able to look at that solution. So data's helped me a lot, ultimately. I mean, in my LinkedIn and kind of the model I live by, it's, in God we trust, everyone else bring data. Because you need to back that up. You need to stand on that data. But then by having this data set, and especially this clean data set, you can really start to, again, scale your people and break biases, right? I remember doing these inspections for a company in one of these industries, and they just didn't believe our data, right? But when you go inside the asset and you look at the heat map and you compare, you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to question that anymore too. So it's just, again, it's kind of, reaffirming or presenting value. But again, it's all about how you present it too, because again, data can be very misleading too. So that's why it's so important to take high fidelity, clean data and build these constant feedback loops in between.
Sounds like a little bit of augmented reality. It could go a long way, right? Can you imagine projecting the heat map onto the surface of that lined, above ground storage tank and just like having it? That's what that red means, right? Because I can see it now.
Not only can I imagine it, I've seen it, right? I have the privilege of working in the mothership here in Pittsburgh, go Browns. But, so we're constantly testing these things inside. You got to find a customer that ultimately sees it and you can create a business case. But, we have these like hackathons internally with all the engineers, and I just grab popcorn and watch them go to work. And it's just these amazing, bright engineers from all over the world who are taking these data sets and stretching what we see as possible. So there's a picture of me years ago in Kansas City with a customer where they had one of those Oculuses on, and they were standing inside their dry scrubber, right? Which is how you clean the baddies out of the power plants. But it's coming, man. And again, when you have this data set, as technology evolves, you can just incorporate that data, right? And you need, again, establish that partner that understands that technology is evolving, and it's evolving quicker than it ever has. So the future looks bright.
And then, MPJ, in your experience, like, I got to imagine this isn't just like a cut and dry one meeting type thing.
No.
Like
that'd be awesome if it was. But
and I could draw from my own experience and say it all takes time. But in your experience, what are the most significant barriers to the adoption of robotics? And then what strategies are you guys using to address those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive. I'm not going to lie. I was with a customer the other day that they were paying probably 5 times less than what we would charge. So you got to focus on these proof of values, right? We have, we're going to come out here and we're going to put you in front of a proposal that you're going to sit back and it's going to be a little bit of a sticker shock. Now, I could discount it, but what is that going to do for you? You need to have some skin in the game. So we need to understand the value, and then we need to prove that out. And so when I was talking about kind of this roadmap, it's saying, all right, you're seeing this as a stop in the road, right? Doing an inspection. So it's kind of seen as a cost center to some people, let's be honest. But it's incorporating, all right, how much value did I create? And so we do go out of our way to say, hey, it might have cost you, call it $100,000, but can we agree that there's $8 million of value after this, right? And if it's not, what is it? And then honestly, in some cases, you're like, no, you actually have a lower risk factor than we have. It's actually twice as much as that. And then you utilize those proof of value wins to elevate those conversations. There's departments of these organizations that have the dollars to invest in these types of technologies. You just got to show it has a return on investment, and specifically that you're moving the index on these industries. So for me, and what you saw when you were here in Pittsburgh, it's really about how they deploy capital to address their aging infrastructure. If you can extend the life of an asset, you free up cash, and you're able to prioritize the 5-year plan, that's a big deal, right? And that gets the attention of the C-suite. And if you get the attention of the C-suite, I got some hell of a C-suite salespeople, including my CEO. So they sit down and they grin, they crank that partnership. Sometimes I just see myself as a conversation broker. But if you start on the ground floor, which I recommend, again, how do we help that person to get access to the next person, to get access to the ultimate decision makers of these organizations? So creating value throughout the organization. But again, it's expensive. And technology is always going to be expensive because it is a heavy lift up front. But as we can see through, the news and everything, it's coming. And the good ones will survive. And if it's a bad technology, well, obviously it won't be around that long.
Does anyone
we're still here.
And to anyone listening, to try to relate that back to what you do, it's, technology, cool, flashy, shiny, or whatever, right? You got to build the business use case for yourself, your company, and your decision makers. What does it do for your bottom line, right? Then in the case of, a lot of what MPJ and Gecko do, it's, can we reduce a shutdown that costs us X? And, is that multiple times what they're going to be spending on the inspection, as an example, right? So take that knowledge and then just bring it back and apply it to your specific situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you can do something faster too, because that's often hard to quantify. If you can get a unit back online generating money 50% faster than it took before, like that is a quantifiable cost that we can calculate, but we just got to figure out who knows that answer. So there's multiple value categories, but to your point, Nick, it's about building that business case and really, making sure that you can have an eraser out if you need to update these categories along the way.
And also painkillers sell better than vitamins. So
Yeah, they do.
I think, anyone in I think anyone in these types of industries can relate. And honestly, just solving the first problem that your client has that's on fire is a great way to start a long lasting relationship.
Be the hero.
That's right. So MP, this has been great. I've, even though, we've talked, I've visited the facilities, I've learned a lot today, but what final piece of advice would you give to this next generation that's coming up and, the industries you guys serve, AEC, right, about integrating robots and data into their workflows?
Yeah. Be curious. Seriously, the more curious you are, the more questions that you ask and the more insights you can drive from technology. If you're getting hit up by salespeople and trying to sell you stuff you don't think you need, take a 10-minute conversation with something that you think is valuable, because there's really two things that can come from that. One, you confirm what you're doing is what you should be doing and it's right on path. Or two, you open up a door to a future you didn't know was there. If I was going to shorten that, I would say adapt or die. It's coming so quickly. Technology, AI, wait till you hear what's coming out of, Davos. I'm sure there's going to be even super intelligent AI or something to that effect. We got to get better with our adjectives here, but pretty soon there's going to be such a big gap in technology, whether it's, in the AEC industry or the oil and gas industry or the power generation industry. It's just going to be too much to overcome, right? So for these organizations that are looking to create value for their customer bases or for their communities, see what's out there, because it's changing and it's coming quickly and it's effective. There is a lot of, BS, we'll call it, but there's also a lot of great things. And I'm telling you all, get the chance to really see, be curious, and support your team. And if there is a good opportunity, really pressure test it, because you'd be surprised of what can come downstream from that. Gecko's a success from that mentality, and we're not finished and we're not content where we are. There's huge, great opportunities at Gecko, and I encourage you all to, if you have queries, just send them over to us or Nick, and we can definitely help you with those. And looking forward to the future. Speaking of which, MPJ, if the listeners want to contact you about that or anything else, what is the best way for them to reach you? So adult work MySpace, or affectionately known as LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, just Michael Paul Jenkins. Pretty sure I'm the only one with a hyphen in that name. Thanks, Mom. My email, mpj@geckorobotics.com. I was honored to have that email. But that's a great way. Our website, too, to check it out. And we're here in Pittsburgh, too. So there's constant events that we have. If you're ever in the area and you want to come through, like Nick, I think you've come a few times. So that's the best way to get in front of us. And then there's ultimately, we're very, very active on social media, too. So you can definitely see our videos and posts online. So definitely great things coming, and looking forward to expand those relationships.
Really exciting. Appreciate it, MPJ.
Thanks, Nick.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.